This is 2.2, Step 3, the literary aspect jigsaw, video 4, the literary aspect use of naming and unnaming. So take some notes in your packet on this literary aspect so that you can become an expert for your home-based group. First of all, I want you to understand what I mean when I label this pattern, use of naming, unnaming, what we're going to talk about when we talk about examples of this. So it's really any reference to naming or labeling or changing names or taking away names. So in Gilead, things don't have the same names that they've always had in the past, right? Things have been changed. People don't even have the same name necessarily as they had in the time before. And so you're going to watch for that. You're going to watch for how the names are created. First of all, an example is the handmaids, right? They are called of and whatever their commander's first name is. So the narrator, Offred, is of Fred. Of Glenn is of Glenn. Oh, I forgot the space. Of Warren is of Warren. And so looking at how the names are created is going to help you get to the why this name has been changed, because it's usually for purposes that help the regime of Gilead. Notice that Offred is preoccupied with language. She spends a lot of time thinking about words, names, language, how it's used, how it's changed, and then she often makes an ironic comment or two about the changes. And, you know, she's looking at how her world has changed in a way that is finite, sort of tangible to her, which is of the naming. So look at what she says in regards to this. Also, another thing to look at when you're looking at this pattern is neologisms, which are newly created, newly coined terms that Gilead has created, like angels, guardians, handmaids, aunts, etc. And so they have created a lot of terms, and it's usually in order to help their totalitarian regime and help the people sort of understand the new ideologies and accept them rather than the old. All right, let's take a look at some examples from the first reading. I have, I think, 6 or 7 examples altogether. No need to write them all down. You could, if you wanted, you could grab your book and actually mark them in the book. That's perfectly fine for you to mark the text. So the first one is from chapter 1 on page 1. There was old sex in the room and loneliness and expectation of something without a shape or name. Second one comes in that same chapter, and this is at the end of the chapter. We learned to whisper almost without sound. In the semi-darkness, we could stretch out our arms when the aunts weren't looking and touch each other's hands across space. We learned to lip read, our heads flat on the beds, turned sideways, watching each other's mouths. In this way, we exchanged names from bed to bed: Alma, Janine, Dolores, Moira, June. And so this is really the only time that we see June referenced. And because the other names are all referenced at different points in the book, we can then, through the process of elimination, determine that the narrator has this name, June. And she's going to mention in the book later about her original name, her real name, her name from the time before. And watch what she says about it. She's never going to say June. Chapter 4, I know this man's name, Nick. I know this because I've heard Rita and Cora talking about him. And once I heard the commander speaking to him, Nick, I won't be needing the car. And chapter 4, page 19, this one is a little plumper than I am. Her eyes are brown. Her name is Avglen. And that's about all I know about her. She may be a real believer, a handmaid in more than name. I can't take the risk. So more than name, a handmaid in more than name. Here we have 2 references to name in that example. All right, let's take a look at, we've got 3 more. A couple from chapter 5. You can see the place under the lily where the lettering was painted out when they decided that even the names of shops were too much temptation for us. Now places are known by their signs alone. And so there are no names on store fronts because they don't want the handmaids reading words at all. Names of shops were too much temptation. So what is the temptation there? You can think about in that example. Chapter 5, as I pass, she looks at me into my eyes, and I know who she is. She was at the Red Center with me, one of Aunt Lydia's pets. I never liked her. Her name in the time before was Janine. So this is of Warren, and when Offred sees her shopping with her big pregnant belly, sort of flaunting her pregnancy, we have her name from the time before, Janine. And then this last one from chapter 7, dear you, I'll say just you, without a name. Attaching a name attaches you to the world of fact, which is riskier, more hazardous. Who knows what the chances are out there of survival? Yours. I will say you, like an old love song. You can mean more than one. So here we have the danger, right, of names and naming. Names are dangerous. They're powerful in the book. And once you give something a name, you give it power, or the idea power. Let's take a look at some of the effects of this literary aspect. So what I was just talking about, how naming and taking away names gives the namer power, it sometimes can give the thing that is named power as well. I think in the book, a lot of times we see the namer, the person who is voicing the name, get power from the naming more than anyone else. And the named or unnamed is reduced in power. So when a handmaid changes from June to Offred, or of Warren instead of Janine, it takes their individual power away, and it makes them a property or belonging to the commander, to the male with the most power. Watch what Offred, I already mentioned this, but watch what she chooses to do with her original name. This is going to come up, and for her it becomes a secret, and so keep your eye out for that. That might be a good thing to trace as you read. Remembering old names and labels does give Offred hope sometimes, when she can remember, oh, I remember her from the time before, or I remember this from the time before. It at least gives her some sanity and ability to move on in her day-to-day, because she has some memory that life wasn't always like this. And I think also accepting the name at times allows Offred to function in her current conditions. And that's the idea of compartmentalizing. So when she is a handmaid instead of June, it allows her to function as a handmaid and to try to kind of shut off her other thoughts so that she can get through this necessary and sometimes horrific part of life. All right, the next step, I got one more. Creating new words to describe things, like neologism, normalizes and gives validity to the regime's ideals. And so in that way, naming things gives them power. If you call someone an aunt, it gives them a little more power in terms of connection and maybe familial intimacy, right, than boss or angel instead of warrior. Makes us maybe appreciate them and see them as protectors more than fighters or people guilty of murder, really. Okay, so those are some ideas of the effects. And then the last thing is to think about connections to the theme. So the first theme that we're tracing, the power of voice to create truths, this one I think is pretty obvious with this literary aspect, because once you name something new, once you give something a new name or someone a new name, you are